G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with an apology for the Affronted regarding last week's temper tantrum I threw when I put up a clip concerning the correlation between atheism and autism as reported in New Scientist magazine, and a bunch of people took me to task over the quality of the survey which New Scientist was reporting, and I responded to my perception that they were attacking me. I'm sorry that that's how I responded. I'm sorry that that's how I perceived your input. It's a thing that's in my family known as the big hammer reflex. When I saw a clip a couple of days ago by Bike Messenger 7, how you going Earl, where he talked on calmness, I realised that in a sense finding oneself in a flame war on YouTube is an experiment in calmness. And the longer one's able to maintain their cool and their detachment, the better one does in the flame war. I'm sorry that Conference Report, Loreleila, SageBodisattva, Ella 55, Ella 2007K, all of the people that I've been chatting to for months and months, if not a year, I'm sorry you didn't recognise that I was in temper tantrum flame war mode. The genesis of that particular temper tantrum was when I saw a new clip by Potholer 54, new nominations for the Golden Crocoduck Award. Now, the Golden Crocoduck Award is Potholer poking fun at fundamentalist Christians. Fair enough, that's his trip. I don't mind him poking fun at fundamentalist Christians if he wants to. I think it's a bit like stoning the lunatics in Bedlam, because it doesn't really achieve much, apart from stirring them up and making, the bloke with the rocks look cruel. However, this time he found some particularly funny individuals who not only looked like Santa Claus, but they firmly believe that the world is fixed and the sun revolves around the earth. Now, in his usual style, Potholer 54 conflated the fact that he'd found 3 fundamentalist Christians who thought the world is fixed and the sun revolves around it, with the idea that all people who think the world is fixed with the sun going around it must be fundamentalist Christians. I've heard on Radio National Science Report people quoting surveys where 73% of American university graduates believe that the sun revolves around the earth. And I don't think 73% of university undergraduates are fundamentalist Christians. I think there's a lot of people in America who think the sun revolves around the earth. They don't know the difference between an orbit and a revolution, and they got it backwards anyway. But yeah, Potholer 54 had quite a funny movie. At the very end of it, his colophon, his finishing stroke, was to have a shot of a Bible and claim that that would be enough until next time. And when the next time came that science proved the Bible wrong, then the fundamentalist Christians, or he might have called them creationists, they would merely reinterpret the Bible because, as Potholer 54 said, that's what they do every time. And I just thought, oh no, how can you say that? If Potholer 54, from his alleged pillar of scientific rectitude, claims that the Bible bashers are not permitted to reinterpret their data, then that means that by reciprocal rights, science is not permitted to reinterpret its data. So I left a comment on his thread pointing that out. And I got jumped on by the Potholer 54 attack pack of evangelistic atheists who exist in fairly great numbers, and they automatically assumed that if I said anything at all against Potholer 54, I must be a fundamentalist Christian creationist who hated science. And I had 2 days of it. During those same 2 days, I sort of wore out my kneecaps kicking myself up the arse by trying to paint over some bad epoxy that hadn't gone off on a science project that I'm doing. So at the end of Sunday afternoon, when it was 2 degrees, I finished with the sunfoil project for the day, disgruntled and cranky with myself there, picked up the phone to have a look on YouTube and see what was going on, and I had an inbox full of yet more ridiculous assertions that I was a Christian creationist. And that's about when the big hammer reflex set in. Alright, my clip reading the New Scientist, that was the first blow in the big hammer reflex tantrum. About this big hammer reflex. I was maybe 8 years old trying to build a model of a Chinook helicopter. Like a lot of kids building model planes, or old men building sunfoils, they try to rush their fences and go ahead to the next step before the glue or the paint is dry. And in the case of the Chinook helicopter, the fuselage kept collapsing and I got fingerprint glue impressions all over it. And when I realised it was never going to look any good, I went bananas with my father's claw hammer and I smashed it to bits. The old man came home, found the busted up model in the corner of the workshop, asked what happened. I told him. He sat me down and he explained a day in 1926 when he left school to work for his father in the coach building workshop, blacksmith shop, and they had a screw cutting machine. And the screw cutting machine had a very large handle, a very large wheel with a handle on it, maybe 4 or 5 feet in diameter, to give you the leverage to work a reduction gearbox to turn a die so that you could cut a thread onto a very long steel rod. All the employees hated this screw cutting machine because it was just such hard work, it was so slow. My grandfather was reluctant to take their advice and put an electric motor on it. So lunchtime came one day and he decided he was going to show them how good the screw cutting machine was. Maybe he started at morning tea, but he spent hours winding this screw cutting machine, and come afternoon tea he got to the point where he knew all he had to do was just wind the wheel backwards, and that was easy, not doing any work. He started to wind the wheel backwards after he'd had his cup of tea, and that's when he found that he'd set the die up probably 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees out of true. So he'd cut a crooked thread onto a 3-foot long rod, turning his hand wheel 100 times to get the die to go around once. And now when he came to take the die off, his crooked die was cutting the crooked thread back off his steel rod. And he started to swear. And he started to try different ways of setting the die up, and he realised there was no possible way he could fix it. So my father was in the armature winding section where he was starting to get interested in the electrics of cars. And he saw his father coming out of a blacksmith shop carrying hammer Tobin. Little sidetrack there. The sledgehammers in the blacksmith shop were named after the town's clergyman. Monsignor Tobin was the Catholic preacher in town. He was the biggest, fattest preacher in town because he got fed the best. So hammer Tobin was an 18-pound sledge. And my father saw the look on his father's face, and he saw the sledgehammer, and he says, "What you up to, boss?" And through gritted teeth, my grandfather said, "I'm going to fix the screw cutting machine." And my father thought, what adjustments do you make to a cast iron screw cutting machine that stands 8 foot tall or something with a sledgehammer? So he followed along to watch, and my grandfather walked up to the machine and started belting it with a sledgehammer. And the noise made everybody else in the workshop quit what they were doing and come round to watch. And when it became clear that there was no explanation and the old fellow was just going to keep swinging his hammer, my father and all the employees at 4:15 walked across the road and sat in the park, and they just sat down under a tree and watched. And at 5 o'clock my father went across and shut the doors of the workshop and sent everybody home. And at 10:30 at night my grandfather came home from work. Not a word was said. Went to work the next day, and 7 o'clock in the morning the 12 employees and my father and my grandfather show up, and there was not one piece of the screw cutting machine bigger than 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches, and it was spread right throughout both sides of the workshop and out in the blacksmith shop as he'd busted the cast iron machine to pieces, and its hand wheel, its axles, its gears, its gearboxes, everything. Everything that he broke, he chased the bits down and hammered them till they were so small that they could never be used for anything ever again. It was never going to annoy him. Right. So my father cautioned me about the big hammer reflex, and I try not to have them. But it seems that, you know, like if I make a 15-minute movie about antinatalism and Garriott in Mendham makes 5 45-minute excoriating torrents, I start off trying to be reasonable and I get a bucket of shit poured on my head and I get more combative and crankier and finally I'm red in the face and shouting expletives and I'm just as bad as he is. In this case, when I filmed this New Scientist article, I was not aware that the title and everything inside the pink highlight refers to the first study, where the team found that adolescents with autism were almost 90% less likely than non-autistic peers to express a strong belief in God. I had no idea it was a study of 25 people, and 12 of which were autistic. I was taught in high school you need 33 random samples for a minimum universe for a statistically accurate survey. I always thought you had to go 10% over and go for 36. You know, when I wanted to find out what women liked in bed, I tried to go out and have sex with 36 random women who were prepared to tell me the answer after I'd had sex with them, you know. Totally ridiculous idea. All I found out was what women who like having sex with me enjoy. Not a statistical universe of humanity at all. So I'm surprised that these people, you know, got quoted so heavily by New Scientist. I think it's a piece of, well, tabloid sensationalist journalism. What they did to make it worse is the stuff that I've highlighted in green. Noren Zayan's team performed 3 other studies which involve questioning hundreds of people about their religious belief, and mentalisation. In each study, a professed belief in God correlated with higher mentalising scores. So, for the purposes of propping up their sensationalist headline, giving the weakest study 2/3 of the article, they've appended the hundreds of subjects line referring to the 3 other studies at the dag end of it, and yeah, they sucked me right in. When you people who've got a desire and an access and a predilection to use Google went and had a look at the study, you found out that it was 25 and 12 and had a FizzBang pop reaction at the size of the survey, and then came back and told me how dumb I was for paying any attention to a small survey that was obviously designed to conflate autism and atheism, and therefore I was demeaning atheists. Excuse me? I get a pension for narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial traits, as well as me nurse's bad back and me ultralight test pilot's foot. The number of times I've had people suggest to me that I was autistic or Asperger's is about equal to the number of times I've had them suggest I was narcissistic. And my understanding is there's a bit of paranoid personality disorder, there's some schizoid personality disorder, there's some antisocial personality disorder, and there's some post-traumatic head injury syndrome, and I own the history to nail down all of those 3 diagnoses, you know. But other people like poking their labels on me. I don't see suggesting that somebody's got autistic traits is a put down, especially when, as SageBodisattva said, here's a big long list of all these high achieving autistics. Why was it a put down? I was looking for an explanation for why atheists can't imagine any God theory worth having. Not trying to put them down by saying, ha ha, look, see, I was cranky as a bastard, but I was merely trying to acquiesce to the requests of OAAJBS on Pothole of 54's thread, who said, when are you going to post your data? So I did. I posted the data. I read the magazine articles. And then everything went downhill until OAJBS told me the numbers 3 days later. Sorry, bye, out of tape. When I'm cranky, numbers are the only thing that works. Ciao.